Brian has helped thousands of individuals enhance and improve their communication practices across multiple industries. A faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania, Brian is also the founder and president of Shapiro Communications, a Philadelphia-based professional development company that provides communication workshops and training programs that ensure an organization's communication practices produce the healthiest customer, client, and employee experience possible. When he's not working or biking his two young sons back and forth to school, he loves skiing, listening to his vast vinyl collection, playing guitar, practicing Tai Chi, and planning family adventures with his wife, Adina. Please help me welcome Brian Shapiro.
All right, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Like many things in life, our human communication can be a double-edged sword. It can help generate understandings and bridge divides, while in the next breath, it can inadvertently create barriers and misunderstandings. And I'm sure all of you have witnessed this on numerous occasions, whether it's trying to engage with employees or trying to deliver the type of customer service you want your store to be known for, or dealing with suppliers or managers. And what better place to experience the double-edged sword of communication than the town I was born and raised in, Los Angeles. Actually, I was born in Hollywood. I kid you not. And although I currently live in Philadelphia, I take my kids back there every now and then to visit their grandparents. So here's my 4-year-old, soon-to-be 5-year-old Levi. He wanted to see that Hollywood sign, and you can see it right up there, just to the left of his head. Isn't he a cute guy? You should see him throw a tantrum. It's unbelievable. And no, just so you know, the other view from the Hollywood sign, if you're looking the other way, there's Los Angeles in winter. And you wonder why 18 million people live in Southern California. So why did I leave? Because if you want to get from where I am to downtown, it probably takes you 5 hours in the car with all the traffic. No, I do exaggerate a bit. But I was born and raised in this LA entertainment industry family. And it was their job to artfully use communication as a way to manufacture realities for people. In other words, from a very early age, I was exposed to some fantastic spinning of tales. And as I got older, I began to realize that some of this spin was in fact true, and some of this spin was not so much. But each and every time, people's attention was captured and held. Hence began my lifelong fascination with the human communication process. And when we talk about communication, how many of you in this room here today would say that you're pretty good communicators? Let's see, by a show of hands, raise your hands. I mean, all of you, everybody in this room, including the kids, should be raising their hands high in the air, because you wouldn't be where you are personally or professionally if you were not good communicators. But let me ask you this. How many of you would say your communication has ample room for growth? Let's see, by show of hands. Excellent. I'm glad to see everybody's hands are in the air. I'm standing up on a stage so my hands can be the highest, right? Because I will tell you, I am the first one to admit that I have ample room for communication growth. Now, actually, I take that back. I would be the fourth person to tell you that. And it's kind of ironic, right? I'm the communication expert. I teach this stuff at an Ivy League school. But no, my wife would be the first one to tell you, naturally. And then the second and third would be my kids. You saw Levi up there. I also have a 7.5-year-old, Asa. And recently, being February, as many of you know, the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. And that city went bananas. I've only lived there 6.5 years, but folks were waiting generations for that to occur. And so they have the big Super Bowl victory parade a few days later. The epicenter of that parade is a mere 4 blocks from our house. Now, if you know Philadelphia at all, it's a very densely packed, tight city with not a lot of open space. And so here we have 700,000 people who, 1, are not accustomed to celebrating a Super Bowl championship, 2, are not used to being inebriated at 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning when it's 28 degrees outside. And as many of us know, what goes in must come out. And there was not a lot of open space. Some of the only open space was this easement next to our row house. We happen to have this large open space next to our house, which started to become a public urinal. So I'm out there and I'm yelling at people, like, hey, what are you doing? How you can't do this? And they're just like, ha, yeah, everybody's so happy and giddy. So my 7-year-old, he decides he's going to create a sign. Right? So in his nice 7-year-old handwriting, in crayon, green crayon, writes down, we like the Eagles, but we don't like pee on the side of our house. This is not a toilet. He makes 2 of these. Daddy goes outside, gets some duct tape, puts them out on the side of our house. 30 minutes later, totally dry. And a child shall lead them, right? So we all have room for communication growth. One of the reasons that we do is because really nobody has formally taught us how to communicate. I mean, if you really think about it, if you go back to your schooling, all the way back to kindergarten, all the way through to whatever level of education you have, let me ask you this. How many of you were required to take a course titled Empathy? Let's see, show of hands. Course titled Empathy. Or how about a course that was 100% dedicated to listening? It was called Listening, and that's all it was. Like one. So in many ways, you have not been properly trained, but you've taken math, science, and history classes, but not these core communication classes. And that's what I want to focus on today. I want to be able to provide you with some valuable tools that you can immediately begin to apply after lunch today that will allow you to become what I like to refer to as an exceptionally human communicator. Exceptionally human communicators can connect to a variety of people in a variety of settings, and they can create understandings more often than not. So is that something that you might be interested in? Yeah, let's hear it, please. Yes, excellent. Thank you. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, here is our agenda. The first thing I want to talk to you about is really communication. It's a wonderful word that we like to use all the time, but do we really actually know what it means? And so I want us to have a working definition that we all share together so that we are all on the same page. Following that, I would like for you to explore your own personal communication styles, because if we are looking to make small alterations in your communication practices, we need to begin with wherever you are at, and each of you are at a different place, so we will assess that. After that, I'm going to introduce the 3 pillars of exceptional communication. And these ancient pillars that have been around for hundreds of years are as applicable today as they were when they were first discovered. And then finally, we'll combine all of that together, your communication style, the 3 pillars of exceptional communication, so that we have an action plan so you know what you can do immediately following lunch today so you can be that much more exceptionally human in your communication. And let me just reassure you of something here. I am not talking about a radical transformation of who you are and what you do. This is no magic Tony Robbins moment here, folks. We are talking about manageable, achievable, modest alterations to the current communication practices that currently serve you well. Right? So something that is easily attainable for each and every one of you. So let us begin, and let's journey into the world of communication. I'm going to step off the stage for a moment. And communication. It can mean many things to many people, but for the purposes of today, what I would like to begin with is these 5 criteria for communication. Criteria 1 is communication requires a sender and a receiver. We're talking about 2 people. One person's sending a message, another person's receiving a message, vice versa. It turns around and the receiver becomes a sender becomes a receiver, but it goes both ways. It's a 2-way process. Next, you have the generation of what is called a message. And what I mean by that is that we all have thoughts and we all have feelings inside of us. And if we want to share our thoughts and feelings with the people around us, we need to be able to create a message so that people can begin to understand what that is. Because we do not have the ability for, just because we have the same barber, I'm going to look at you. Right, we don't have this ability. Right, we have no idea what we're nodding to each other about at all. So we have to generate a message. The way we generate a message is by using symbols. We use symbols. Now the symbols, when we talk about symbols, okay, the most common symbol we use in our communication is language. Right? Language is the most common symbol. Language represents our thoughts and feelings. Right? Symbols. The American flag is a symbol. The direct interpretation, symbolic representation of the American flag is 13 original colonies in those red and white stripes, and the field of blue with the 50 stars representing the 50 states. Right? Originally, it was the 13 stars in the circle, and then as the country grew, more stars were added. Right? It's symbolic of the United States. It's not the United States itself. It's a symbol of it, and we all take pride in that symbol. Our words are the same way. They are symbolic of something. So once we have our message and we've used our symbols, the next thing we do is we convey that message through what's called a channel. That channel can be an audio channel, I'm speaking with you. It can be a visual channel, I'm waving at you. We can do social media, we can do telephone, we can write a letter. Oh no, write a letter, that's totally ancient. We don't do that anymore. We can send a 160-character message to one or whatever it might be, all these different channels, and hopefully, the other party that we're communicating with is going to interpret our message, because of the symbols we use and the channel we deliver that message in. They will interpret it in a way that we intended for them to interpret it, right? That's communication. The tricky part of communication, however, is this. Over 90% of our communication exists in the realm of interpretation. In other words, 90% of the time, somebody else is making up a story about what it is you just conveyed to them, and it may or may not be in alignment with what you wanted them to interpret. Anybody ever experienced that? On a daily basis. On a daily basis. Right? So that's communication. Communication essentially is interpretation. And it's a very important point I want you to sort of really drill into your brains here this afternoon, because we're going to build upon that. Because all of you are leaders. All of you own your operations. You're leading teams. And this one, oops, didn't mean to do that. I like this one quote from Deborah Barrett. She's a professor at Rice University down in Houston. And when she writes, is there somebody from Rice? I hear, oh, there we go. All right. Woo-hoo. Yeah, that's what you're having for lunch too. True, see, interpretation. What she says is leadership communication, and that's all of you. That's all of us. Leadership communication is the controlled, purposeful transfer of meaning by which leaders influence a single person, a group, an organization, or a community. Now, last night, I was walking around and talking to some of your fellow Do It Best member owners about their experience with their stores. And one gentleman from sort of upstate South Carolina talking about different styles of communication and what he has to deal with. He says, sometimes there's a very big difference between the customer who comes in with that screw and shoves it in your face and says, I need you to help me find this now. And that's the same person who comes in 3 times a week with this same kind of issue. Or the person who comes in genuinely confused, needs help, look, I need to find this size screw, but just an inch longer, can you help me? And when he helps that person, feels immensely satisfied with that experience, it's because he's engaging in this leadership communication. So all of you in your leadership positions have to recognize the interpretation that's taking place in others' minds. All right, so there's our definition of communication. Are there any questions or comments? Good. How's lunch, by the way? Good? Excellent. All right. So now, let's talk about you. I mean, this is what this is about, after all. It's all about you. So if you would go ahead and grab one of the worksheets that's sitting on your table there. And if you were to go ahead and open that up. And if you look right at that first page, you will see this model, this diagram called the Johari window. And allow me to explain what the Johari window is for you. So the Johari window is a tool that is designed to help give you some insight into yourself, and in particular to your current communication strengths, challenges, and opportunities for growth. And if you look at that model on your page or look up here on the screen, I want to begin with the upper left-hand corner, where it says the open area or arena. And on top of that, it says known to self. And to the side, it says known to others. And so what this means is that the open box represents those aspects or qualities about how you communicate that you know about yourself, and anybody who knows you knows this about you as well. And I'll give you a personal example. So for me, I know that, one, I typically like to incorporate a lot of humor in my conversations with people, and I also know that I can be quite direct with people as well. So that anybody who knows me would say that about me, and I know that about myself. So here's what I would like you to do. Underneath the box there where it says open and the lines underneath, I want you to write down 2 or 3 qualities or aspects about how you communicate that you would consider to be open qualities. You know this about how you communicate, and anybody who knows you would say, yes, I agree, this is how Judy communicates. Right. So go ahead, take a few moments and write down 2 or 3 qualities about how you communicate that would be considered open qualities. Are there any questions? Is it clear? The next box I want to look at is the one right below there. It's called the hidden area. And if you look at the top of the Johari window, it says known to self. And if you look to the side of the hidden area, it says not known to others. So what this refers to are those qualities and aspects about how we communicate that we know about ourselves, but we don't share with anybody around us, and they probably wouldn't know it or observe it in our behavior because we keep it hidden. Okay, so one example I like to use is that I find myself to be an incredibly conflict-adverse person. I don't like conflict. And it would be shocking to anybody who knows me because I can be so direct that, wait, how can you not like conflict? But it is something about me. Another quality I would say of mine that's hidden is that whenever I'm getting ready to do a large presentation like this, I get incredibly nervous, incredible stage fright, all of that stuff that comes along. But anybody who's observing me would have no idea that that was going on. So it's a hidden quality. Now it's wide open, okay? But it's a hidden quality. So we all have hidden qualities about how we communicate. And I'm only talking about how we communicate, folks. So please, write down 1 or 2 qualities about how you communicate that you would consider to be hidden qualities. You know this about yourself, but other people might not know this about you. 1 or 2 qualities. The next area I want to point out is the upper right box, the blind spot. And you'll see on the top it says not known to self. On the side it says known to others. How can this be? How could somebody else know something about how we communicate that we don't know about ourselves? Well, I've been married almost 9 years now, and I realize there are a lot of things that I'm blind to, or at least have been pointed out to me. And I've also had qualities about how I communicate pointed out to me by students in some of my prior classes that I didn't realize. I had one student write down an evaluation that I spoke too loud in class and it hurt her ears. So I learned to modulate my voice, but I had no idea that that was going on. I was always wondering why no, I'm just kidding. So I want you to write down, so whatever we're currently blind to, we are currently blind to. We cannot possibly fill in that box by what we're currently blind to. But I can pretty much guarantee that each and every one of you have had at some point in your life somebody point out to you some aspect about how you communicate that at first you may not have realized or accepted as being true for you, but then later came to realize, you know what, they were right. So please write down 1 or 2 qualities that were once blind qualities, that somebody pointed out to you that you didn't recognize about how you communicate, but now you know. Excellent. So we are going to refer to this a bit later during this lunch presentation. This is this is where your open area is, the areas you don't necessarily share with people, the things that people pointed out to you in the past. So this is your personal communication assessment right here. This is your starting point. The starting point for what? Well, it's the starting point for this, the 3 pillars of exceptional communication. And let me tell you a little bit about what these 3 pillars of exceptional communication are about. And I want to give you a quick history lesson so that we can best understand where they come from, how they emerged, and better understand how we might be able to use them today. So let's go back in time, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go back 2,300, 2,400 years to this place, ancient Greece. And ancient Greece is often referred to as the birthplace of Western civilization, the birthplace of this thing that we call democracy, right? People say Philadelphia, that was it, that was the birthplace. Well, a lot of the concepts, a lot of what's going on actually started a lot sooner than that. So here we have ancient Greece. And for the first time in human history, people are given the opportunity to vie for positions of influence and power that traditionally didn't have that opportunity. So all over the streets and amphitheaters of Athens, you have people standing up, trying to get everybody's attention, speaking loudly, whatever they could. Some people are attracting a lot of attention. Other people couldn't get 2 people to stop and listen to them. And what was fascinating to the philosophers of ancient Greece was this: how is it that people determined when somebody was speaking whether or not they were speaking the truth with a capital T, the objective truth, the truth that all people could agree to, right? Or the little t truth, my opinion of what I think is true, what I would like to believe is true, but may not necessarily be so. Truth versus truth. We still hear this going on in this very day and age, right? This is the big debate. How do you know the difference? So the big three philosophers of ancient Greece, not Ford, Chrysler, and GM, but Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, each of them had their own approach to being able to determine whether or not this person speaking in the amphitheater or on the street corner was speaking the truth, capital T, or the truth, the little t. So let's begin with Socrates. Socrates said this: if you want to know whether or not somebody's speaking the big T truth or the little t truth, ask them questions. Ask them enough questions, enough of the right questions in the right order, and you'll be able to determine truth from truth. So, let me begin. What's your name, ma'am? Angela? All right, so Angela runs into Socrates on the street. And Socrates says to Angela, "Hey, Angela, how you doing?" And I'm going to play your role so you don't have to say anything. And Angela says, "Socrates, I'm doing great." Socrates says, "That's fantastic, Angela. I always wanted to know, what is it that allows somebody to determine that they are actually doing great? So please tell me, what allows you to determine that you are doing great?" And Angela pauses and thinks, nobody's ever asked me a question like that before, but let me think about it. And she says, "You know what, Socrates? I know I am having a great day because I had a total full night's sleep last night." Socrates says, "Oh, that's great. A full night's sleep is what allows you to determine you're having a great day. Thank you very much. I always wanted to know that. I'll talk to you later." Wait. But just a quick follow-up, if you don't mind. I had last week, had the best night of sleep in weeks, and I had a completely horrible day the next day. Is there anything else that might be in there? And then Angela thinks, she says, "Well, I had a really robust breakfast as well." He said, "Okay, great night's sleep, robust breakfast, absolutely great, thank you." And then, of course, he stops and turns around and says, "You know, about 4 weeks ago, I had like just fantastic breakfast, slept well the night before, and the day was even worse than the other day." So back and forth they go. Pretty soon, Angela's great day is turning into a horrible day. The next time she sees Socrates, she turns around and runs the other way. But the gift, if we call it that Socrates left us is what's referred to as the Socratic method. And anybody know any attorneys or have any attorneys in their family? They're so good at this. That's what they do. Question, answer, question, answer. That's the gift. Right? Now, what happens to Socrates? People didn't like Socrates going around questioning them. So eventually he's dragged up in charges of corrupting the youth of Athens. He was like the punk rock hero of Athens. And he's tried, convicted, drinks hemlock, dead. So long, Socrates. One of his disciples was a guy named Plato. Plato's also interested in truth versus truth, but he sees he doesn't want to wind up like Socrates, dragged into prison, dragged into court on trumped-up charges. He wants to live. Plato comes up with a different approach to determining truth versus truth. Plato says, you know what? If you really want to know whether or not somebody's speaking the truth or they're just giving you their opinion of truth, take your emotions completely out of the equation. As a matter of fact, do not trust your emotions whatsoever at all. Solely rely on this thing in your brain called reason and rationality. Now, mind you, Plato has a point. Have any of you, like myself, ever been in what we like to refer to as romantic love? Anybody been there? Right? Oh my God, the best feeling in the world. You know what? I don't need to go to work today. I don't worry. I'm just going to run things up on my crowd. What do I care, right? Anybody found themselves there, and where did that lead? Sometimes, what's that? You married him. All right, so forget what Plato had to say. Rare exceptions happen. But Plato says, don't trust the emotions. They'll sway you. And truly they do. And modern neuroscience will tell you emotions are biochemical changes in our brain chemistry that influence how we see and interpret things around us. So don't trust your emotions. And that's where we got the term platonic relationship, right? A relationship between two people who otherwise you would think there was going to be a romantic connection there, but it's strictly a friendship. So that was Plato's gift. And there's some good, solid thinking and reasoning behind what Plato has to say. But then Plato passes away naturally, and following Plato comes this guy named Aristotle. Now, Aristotle might have possessed one of the most brilliant minds this planet has ever seen. And Aristotle said, you know what? I like what Socrates was doing. That was good. Question and answer. I kind of like what Plato was doing. You know, the emotions can sway, but you can't completely cut them out. No, there's got to be more to it. Now, you got to realize Aristotle, as a young man, was the tutor to a soon-to-be Alexander the Great. He's a kid tutoring Alexander the Great. Not only that, Aristotle was a biologist. He studied medicine. He had this amazing capacity to observe the world around him and be able to allow the observations to occur over time and then draw conclusions. In other words, Aristotle had what was referred to as negative capability. And I want to point this out because this is important. Negative capability is defined as, this is a very academic term, but I'll break it down for you. Negative capability is referred to as the ability to remain within mysteries, doubts, and uncertainties without any irritable reaching out after fact or reason. In other words, Aristotle had an incredibly high tolerance for not knowing and being okay with it. Can you imagine in this day and age with Alexa and Siri and Google not knowing something? If we want to know something, we can find out anything in about 5 seconds. But Aristotle, he could just wait and not be agitated by not knowing. So this gave him incredibly powerful insight. And he was able to make very detailed descriptions of the animal world and animal reproduction that were confirmed centuries later by what we call modern science. So in Greece, in Athens, he's turning his attention to the most incredible animal on this planet being us, right? We forget we are animals. We are animals. And there's certain things that we do that are very instinctual, right? How many parents in the room? Let's see, by show of hands, right? How many of you got that manual the day your first child was born? Here's what you do. How many got that? Yeah, mine got lost in the mail too, somewhere. But somehow it works, right? It's an instinctual thing. So we have these instincts. And Aristotle turns his attention to people and he says, what are the instinctual cues that one human being needs to provide another human being so that they will actually be paid attention to and be seen as speaking truth? And that's where these three things come in. Aristotle's rhetorical proofs of ethos, pathos, and logos, but to put it in a very pragmatic language, simply this: trust, emotions, and reason. So as I mentioned before, I come from this LA entertainment industry family, and I've done a couple decades of performance work. So I want to do this next section in song for you. So here we go. In each and every interaction, these three pillars are at play. Whether we are conscious of them or unconsciously we sway, these three pillars can be the difference between being heard or being ignored. So let's take a closer look at each one now and learn some more. Thank you very much. Pillar number 1, trust. What is it about a person's communication that allows another person to experience them as being trustworthy? What is it about the way a person communicates that allows other people to experience that person as being trustworthy? Remember, 90% of our communication is interpretation. So here's what I want you to do. Please turn your page on your workbook. Go 2 pages in, you'll see the pillars, and you'll see trust, credibility. And here's what I would like you to do. With the people at your table, I want you to share with each other 1 or 2 examples of what is it about the way other people communicate with you. We're not talking about your communication right now. We're talking about how other people communicate with you. What is it about the way other people communicate with you that allows you to experience that person as being trustworthy? What is it about the way they're communicating that allows you to say to yourself, consciously or unconsciously, wow, I trust that person? Right? Take about 2 minutes and share your responses. Just have a table conversation about this. What is it about the way people communicate that allows you to say to yourself, wow, I think that person's trustworthy? Ready? 2 minutes and go. All right, I'm going to stop you right here just for the sake of time. And will somebody just give me an example of something that was shared at your table? Yes, sir. Body language. Okay, what about body language? No, I'm not trying to, I'm just like, can you give a specific to what about the body language? Okay, eye contact. Okay. Facial expressions. Crossed arms or not crossed arms. Okay. All of these are very good. Now, let me ask you, does good eye contact, not crossing your arms, having the right facial expressions mean that the person's actually trustworthy? No, they may be. They may not be. But when we think about that 90% interpretation, we interpret that and we say, okay, that person is trustworthy. So that's pillar number 1, trust. I'll have you go back. Don't worry, I'll have you go back and figure out what about your communication is generating trust in others. All right, but let's move on to the next one now, emotions. So pillar number 2, right? What is it about the way a person communicates with us? Yes, go ahead, turn the page in the workbook. What is it about the way people communicate with us that allows us to have either a positive or negative emotional experience with that person? What is it about the way a person communicates with us that allows us to have either a positive or negative emotional experience? Again, take a couple minutes, talk with the people at your table, and share some thoughts about what is it about the way a person communicates that allows you to have either a positive or negative emotional experience. All right, I'm going to stop you right here. And again, can I get 1 or 2 examples from you all about what is it about the way a person communicates that allows you to have a positive or negative emotional experience? I'm sorry, one more time? Tone of voice. Okay, their tone of voice. Anybody else have tone of voice? Okay, number of you. How about another example? Yes. Attitude. Thank you very much, young man. Attitude. Who had attitude? Got a few other people. And one more. Okay, if they put emotion into what they're saying, it has an influence. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now, pillar number 3, reason. And let me just take a moment to talk about reason. I mean, there are several things that distinguish the human being from other animals on this planet. Probably the most profound one is this ability to use reason. This part of our brain called the cerebral cortex, prefrontal cortex, is where what we call reason exists. It's a part of the brain that other animals on this planet do not possess. It's a part of the human brain that doesn't fully develop until we are in our late teens, and in some cases, early 20s, and in some cases, never. But there's a reason why there are certain laws in place that say you cannot do this or that until you're 18 years old or 21 years old, because it has to do with the ability to make sound, reasonable judgment calls on things. And the reason kids, aside from you, young man, right, with the exception of you, right, most kids, right, reason just, woo. I mean, I love trying to reason with my 4-year-old. It is the most fun thing if you're into torture, right? But that's an incredible part of our being human. So when we talk about accessing reason, what is it about the way, and instead of having table discussions, I'm just going to ask for you to share some of your answers. What is it about the way a person communicates with you that allows you to say to yourself, wow, that's a reasonable request? Okay, if they have a knowledge base. Knowledge. Thank you, sir. If it's a request, not an order. That's very good. And how about one more? Okay, the language they use, the words they use. Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, so all of you have identified a number of qualities about the way people communicate with you that influence that trust, those emotions, and the reason that we possess. This is all great. So now, with all of these, the trust, emotions, and reason, it's of critical importance to recognize that, look, as trustworthy as you believe yourself to be, as emotionally positive of a person as you think you are, as reasonable and rational as you yourself feel you are coming across, it doesn't matter what you think about your communication, because it's all about them. It's all about the person you are communicating with and how they are interpreting the message and the symbols and the channel and all of that. It's about how they are interpreting it, and they are saying to themselves, I either trust you or don't, I'm either feeling good or not, or you're reasonable, or that is completely unreasonable. Those are the 3 pillars of exceptional communication. Powerful, 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 and an instinctual part of us as human beings. And if we can keep this in mind in those critical interactions, then we can have a profound difference in how other people experience us and our communication. And so that's why I want to get to this action plan. I want for you to have something concrete that you can do today, immediately after leaving here, that will allow you to tap into the power of these 3 pillars. So how are we going to do that? First, in the workbook, you've all identified where your communication openness is, where your hidden areas are, what has been pointed out to you in the past that you did not know, but now you do know. And you can look at those as being strengths, challenges, weaknesses to overcome. But you have an idea on paper, in writing, of how you communicate. So then you look at each one of these 3 pillars: trust, emotions, and reason. Then you think about who is the other person that I'm communicating with. And you start to make choices. You start to make choices. And that's how you start to become exceptionally human communicators. So let me give you an example. Or you're going to give yourself the example. Each and every one of you, I want you to think of one person right now who you communicate on a fairly regular basis with. And I want you to think about somebody that is connected to your store or to your stores. And I want you to go back to this trust page. And on the bottom there it says, aspects of my communication that allow others to view me as trustworthy. I want you to think of that person right now. And I want you to write down 1 or 2 things you can do with how you communicate with that person that will allow that person to experience you as increasingly trustworthy. So go ahead and write that down. 1 or 2 things you can do with your communication that will allow that person to see you as increasingly trustworthy. With that same person in mind, I want you to turn to the emotions page. And once again, underneath the second half, write down one or two qualities about how you can communicate with that person that will allow that person to have a sense that they are valued. Right? That they are valued. Feeling valued is a positive emotional experience, one of the more powerful ones that we can provide. What are one or two things you can do with that specific person that would allow that person to have an increased experience of being valued by you? And then, finally, turn to the next page, reason. And there on the bottom part, same person in mind, one or two things you can do with your communication that will allow that person to better interpret you as being reasonable and rational, even more so than they may be doing right now. So what can you do with how you communicate with that person that will allow them to experience you as being reasonable and rational? So here's what you can, this is for one person, right? Mind you, this is for one person. You're being thoughtful about who this person is and how you're going to communicate with them. If you can, work with this formula. Right? And this is an ancient formula. I'm just passing knowledge on to you. If you can, 5% more often than what you are doing right now. 5% more often. 5% can be a big difference. I work with Philadelphia International Airport. They did an assessment, and they have a $34 billion economic impact on the local economy. And you think about that number, 5% is 720 million. 5% can potentially be huge, but it's totally manageable. In an 8-hour workday, 5% is, I think it's 24 minutes or something of that. It's 26 minutes, somewhere in that area. We're not talking about a tremendous amount. We can even reduce it down further. If 3 times a day, only 3 times a day, you consciously think about who's this other person, how might they be experiencing me, what is my current communication style, what can I do slightly differently that might allow them to have more trust, feel more valued, see me as more reasonable, that's great. If you can do that 3 times a day. I'll give you one that you can do 1 time a day and will have an impact. We all receive dozens, if not hundreds, of emails on a daily basis. And how many times do we look at an email and we say, I'll get back to it, right? I want you to pick 1 email a day that you normally would say, oh, I'll get back to that person later, and instead send an immediate reply, say, thank you for your email, give me a little time to look this over, and I'll get back to you. I can almost guarantee you the other person's going to be very satisfied that they got some kind of response, as opposed to sitting in mystery land trying to figure out why you aren't getting back to them and interpreting that in any way they might imaginably be doing so, and you have no control over that. And one other thing I want to point out about this, when we're talking about any kind of modification to anything that we currently do, we are talking about sometimes it's not going to feel very good at first. It's not going to feel very good at first. Has anybody decided one day that they're just going to decide to get in better shape and go running? Anybody ever done that? Decide to go run or biking or some other kind of physical exercise? Right. What happens the day after you start doing physical exercise and you haven't done physical exercise for a while? What happens? What does your body feel like? Sore. It hurts. Right? Anybody play guitar? Anybody ever play? You have a guitar player. What's it like when you first learn to play guitar? It hurts. You can't avoid it, folks. It's painful until you get calluses on your fingertips or until your muscles get used to it. It hurts. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you want to do this stuff, sometimes it's going to hurt. But we need to distinguish the good pain from the, oh, this hurts because I'm exercising my muscles in ways I haven't done before, and the bad pain, oh, this hurts because I just tore my ACL. There's a difference, but don't let that negative feedback deter you from continuing to push forward. Little bit at a time, it can make a world of difference. So, as I like to say, I don't like to say, but I've been practicing Tai Chi for over 24 years. And I recently took up a new form. And I love what this new Tai Chi instructor says to me. He says, practice will never make you perfect. It will only make you a little less wrong. And I say the same thing about our communication. We aren't perfect. We'll never be perfect. But if we could just be a little less wrong and create just a few less miscommunications, then it could have a profound difference. I invite all of you, right? Well, here's the takeaway, and I have these on a card for you. The question to ask yourself, does my communication allow other people to experience me as being trustworthy, experience feeling valued, view me as reasonable? If you can ask yourself that question in those important interactions, it can make a big difference in how other people might be interpreting you. With that, I invite all of you here today to take the Exceptionally Human Communication Profile. So this is something that I developed that is a 21-question type of a survey. It'll take you about 5 minutes to complete. Upon which you complete it, you will get immediate feedback as to how other people might be experiencing you in terms of how trustworthy, what type of emotional experience they might be having, and how reasonable your communication might be. It takes a mere 5 minutes of your time. There's a password that's required in order to be able to access this profile. So listen carefully. Here's the password. Are you ready? Listen. Listen is the password, all lowercase. All lowercase. Listen. If you forget, there's a tab there to send an email, and it can send you the password. What else can I add for all of you here? Let me get these tables in the back. Let's see. Oh, yes. I do have a book if any of you are interested. Exceptionally Human, Successful Communication in a Distracted World. I do have a few copies. If anybody's interested, you can speak to me afterwards. Otherwise, you are all good communicators. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. But again, I want you to become exceptionally human communicators. You now know a bit more about your communication. You recognize the power of these three pillars and how you can merge these three together. So I hope for all of you, for all of your stores, for all of the people who work in your stores, for your families at home, for all the suppliers you work with the whole Do It Best family, that the application of these will help bring a little more joy and a little more prosperity into all the work that you do. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good remainder of the day. It's a pleasure being here today. I'll be here. Thank you. I'll be here for a few minutes afterwards to answer any questions. So have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you again, Brian, for being with us here today, and thank all of you for being here too. If you would, please fill out the evaluation sheet at your tables, and you can just leave it there when you're done, and enjoy the rest of your day.